What's up, fellow movie buffs and film connoisseurs? It's your self-proclaimed cinema shogun here, and I just got back from seeing The Batman. I'm going to go ahead and warn you all right now, there may be some slight spoilers in this review, but this won't be a full breakdown of the movie, spoiling every aspect of it, but there may be some slight spoilers. But I will try to avoid too many spoilers. So you can still watch this review if you haven't seen the movie, but if you want to go into the movie totally in the dark about it, then click off and come back once you've seen it. But I just got back from the movies. This is my initial reaction. I haven't had too much time to think on it. I haven't seen it twice. I just got back, and I gotta say, I think I loved it. I'm not sure I loved it, but I'm pretty sure I did. It's like when you've been dating someone for a while and you think you love them, but you're not quite sure yet. That's how I feel with this movie. Because, man, oh man, it's the Batman movie that you didn't know you needed, but once you got it, it turned out to be one of the best Batman movies ever. And I fully do mean that. One of the best Batman movies ever. I personally liked it better than Batman Begins. The only Batman movie that I could say is above it for me would be The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight Rises, I had a lot of issues with that movie, and it was still a good movie, though, in my opinion. But I think I would put this movie slightly above it. But I would say this is probably my third favorite Batman movie. Batman Returns, Dark Knight, and this Batman. Yes, I love the Tim Burton Batman movies, and I'm not afraid to say so. Batman Returns is my favorite Batman movie. It was one of the most Gothams we've seen. I enjoyed Danny DeVito's Penguin. I enjoyed Catwoman in that movie. I love Batman Returns. I love Tim Burton's Gotham. And one thing I will say about the Batman is that we finally got Gotham back. Like, in this movie, I felt Gotham. And I think that's very important because Gotham is just as much of a character in Batman as Batman is, as any of Batman's rogue gallery. Gotham, it just has a feel to it. It's like a character. And in the Nolan movies, I felt like we kind of stepped away from that. It started to feel like Gotham was just another generic city. Chicago. It didn't feel like Gotham. This Gotham in this movie felt like Gotham. So I was extremely happy about that. But this was like more of a detective movie than I thought it was going to be. Don't get me wrong, I heard it was going to be a detective movie, but this was almost a detective movie first and a Batman movie second. But I don't mean that in a bad way because, I mean, Batman is a detective. But we're going to see Batman being a detective more than Batman necessarily Batmaning it up. This isn't your Batman that's got a bunch of high-tech gear. I don't think we will ever. I know this movie was taking place around his first couple of years, after his first 2 years of being Batman. But the world that they set up here, I don't think we're ever going to see Batman flying around in a Batjet and stuff like that. I mean, he has some equipment. He had a squirrel suit in the movie. You know, that was a really cool scene when he's squirrel suiting it through the city. But I don't see him having a lot of this high-tech, crazy gear like some of the Batman movies you've seen, like the Ben Affleck Batman movie, or Batman movies. You know, of course, he didn't have his own Batman movie, but Justice League, or Batman versus Superman, worst superhero movie of all time, worst movie of all time. I hate Batman versus Superman. But anyway, these are two very different Batmans. This is a very grounded Batman, even more grounded than the Nolan films. I know that was kind of a grounded, grittier, more of a realistic Batman story. This is even more gritty and realistic. And this is a bare bones Batman. You're going to see some awesome fighting. I don't think he got too, martial arty with it. Like, I didn't see him kicking around and doing too much crazy moves. It was more of a just straight up brutal fighting Batman. It reminded me of like the Arkham City games or the Arkham games. I'm not sure if you've ever played it or played those games, but how Batman is in those video games. It's kind of how he is here. He's comboing people up. I mean, the action was nice. The action was nice when we got action. This movie didn't take action and put it first. It took the detective story and put that first, and then the action came second. And it worked for me. Usually that wouldn't work for me. Usually I'm in there like, where I need some fighting. I need some fighting. But here, I think we got a good blend of it. We didn't see any over-the-top fights, but we got some good fight scenes out of it. And I think overall, people will be pleased with the fighting that we got in this movie. Even though, like I just stated, it took the fighting, it took the action, and put that second behind the detective story, which is something that we haven't seen in a Batman movie yet. We haven't seen Batman really tap into the detective side of him. But also, we haven't seen a Batman like this. Robert Pattinson is the Batman. Robert Pattinson isn't Bruce Wayne. Robert Pattinson isn't Batman. Robert Pattinson is the Batman. And I mean that in a good way. In a good way. I feel like this approach on the character in this movie, we never see Bruce Wayne be Bruce Wayne because Bruce Wayne isn't interested in being Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne is the Batman. The Batman. He's become kind of unhinged. He's obsessed. We never get the billionaire playboy type of Bruce Wayne out of this movie. The well-kept, ladies' man, throwing parties, bumping shoulders with all the other rich people in Gotham. That's not the Bruce Wayne we get in this movie. We get a kind of an emo Bruce Wayne who's cut himself off from the world. He doesn't talk to anybody. He hardly even comes outside except at night to be the Batman. Literally, sometimes when it's during the day, he has to wear shades, and you could tell that the sun's hurting his eyes because he's literally becoming the Batman. He is becoming the Knight. Batman has always been someone who's maybe a little unhinged when you really think about it, and sometimes you could be like, yeah, Batman's kind of crazy and obsessive, for sure. But this takes it to a whole new level, but not in a bad way. Like, it doesn't sit there and make you sit with the fact that, Bruce Wayne's dealing with some issues. It doesn't make you sit there with that, but it definitely shows you that. You could pick up on it. But everything that you may have thought Bruce Wayne was, he isn't in this movie. And I know some people may have an issue with that, but I really liked it. I really dug it. My least favorite part of Batman is when he's Bruce Wayne and he's throwing all the parties and acting like he's just this billionaire playboy. I really don't care about that aspect of Batman. Although it has always been a part of Batman, and I can appreciate that. But like I said, in this movie, Robert Pattinson and the story itself was never focused on telling you who Bruce Wayne was. It was more so focused on telling you, like, even though, yes, he's Bruce Wayne, he's still the Batman. Like, he's still a dark, brooding character. And I've seen people complain about, like, there's no smiling, none of that. Yeah, none of that. There's no happiness to this movie, but not in a bad way. The Batman is supposed to be a dark type of movie. He's a dark type of character. For the most part, I feel like Batman's 50-50, which I think a lot of people have forgotten. Whereas Batman can be this serious, dark character, but there's also a campy side to Batman as well. And I want to get into that conversation a little bit, probably towards the end of this video. But I know people will complain about that, but it totally works. Everything about this movie works, and it gelled so well together. All the actors did an amazing job. I had some complaints about some of the actors in this movie because they don't look like the characters that they're supposed to be playing, but everyone did an amazing job. Everyone did an amazing job. Everyone who talked down on Robert Pattinson, they're all going to be proven wrong. This is probably the best Batman we've gotten. I like Ben Affleck's Batman. I like the way he looks in the suit. Thick. Thick. I like thick Batman because my 90s animated series Batman was a thick Batman. So I like the way Ben Affleck looks in the suit. I don't care for him when he takes the mask off. When he's walking around looking like he's got a muscle suit on. And we never really got to see Ben Affleck shine. I was one of the people who really wanted to see Ben Affleck's Batman movie. Because he looked as close. He looked like Batman more than anyone else that I've seen play the character. Robert Pattinson obviously doesn't look like the Bruce Wayne that you would think he would look like. And they don't try to make him look that way. They don't try to clean him up. He's very much someone who is awkward, socially awkward, doesn't like talking to people, doesn't like coming outside, and he's totally turning into the Batman. He's turning into the Knight. And I think that was really dope. Catwoman, I thought she was going to be annoying. I honestly did. She wasn't. I think that she fit in this movie good. She actually had a very big part. Maybe bigger than she needed. I would say that she's not as important in the movie as Batman, I guess, but she's a very big character in the movie. But by the end of the movie, she gets sent off, and I don't think we will see her necessarily in a sequel, but I dug everything she did. They didn't go too over the top with it. Just like they did with Batman, we saw more of a grounded Catwoman here. A Catwoman that obviously hadn't been a Catwoman for long. This wasn't the jewelry heist Catwoman who could get away with anything, type of Catwoman yet. But maybe she'll become that. Maybe she'll grow into the character. But they did a good job with her. The Penguin. The Penguin was not my comic book Penguin, obviously. But I think they did a good job with him as well. I was just watching the Penguin the whole time in amazement because it was Colin Farrell behind the fat suit. And I'm just like, how the hell did they do this? Because it doesn't look like it's Colin Farrell in a fat suit. It looks good. It looks good. It never looked cheesy. I liked his character in the movie. He didn't have too much to do, but he was like one of the only probably comedic relief we got in this movie. This movie was not a laughy movie, not a jokey movie. I think there was maybe 2 jokes in this movie the entire time, and they were both from Penguin. So definitely not a movie that you're going to go into expecting any type of humor. Honestly, this is like, I don't even see how they made kids' toys out of this movie. It is such a dark movie. And I don't mean dark like, oh, there's a lot of blood and murder and killing, because there's not. I mean, there is some murder and killing, but Batman's not going around murdering and killing people. That's very important. The last couple of Batmans we've seen, they just go off and kill people as if it's nothing. Batman is not supposed to kill people. That's one of Batman's rules, and I respect that rule, and I don't want to see my Batman going around shooting people with machine guns. That's not Batman. Batman could be a lot of different things. Batman could be this dark, brooding character. Batman could be campy Adam West. But Batman could not just run around killing people. That's not Batman. This Batman made sure he wasn't running around killing people, even when it was to his own expense. Like sometimes he would get his ass whooped a little more than he had to just to make sure that he didn't kill people. Often he would stop other people from killing people, even though they were bad guys. So that's what Batman is supposed to be like. And that's how Batman was in this movie. The Riddler. I have such mixed feelings on the Riddler character. I knew that I would have a problem with the Riddler character from the moment I saw him. Because when it comes to villains, I absolutely love Batman villains. Batman has probably the best rogues gallery there is. Or maybe the second best behind Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man and I love me some Batman. Those 2 heroes have the best rogues gallery, the best villains. And the Riddler has always been a villain I liked. I liked the Riddler because he had swag. Riddler would always have his suit on, the matching top hat, cane, little gloves. He was like a pimp, but he had all the riddles. And this one, he's like an unhinged lunatic who didn't get enough attention, and now he's crying about it because, no one loved him when he was a little kid. That's who this Riddler is. And while I understand that the Riddler from the comic book movies, like the Jim Carrey type-ish Riddler that you've seen before in live action, that wouldn't fit in this movie at all. A guy walking around with a top hat, green suit, telling riddles wouldn't fit in this movie. So I understand why they went this route with the character, but I'm not so sure I liked it. The riddles were okay, but at the end of the day, it was like, he just kind of came across as just another crazy lunatic villain who is trying to go too hard to sound crazy and weird because everyone feels the need to do that now. Ever since Heath Ledger played the Joker, everyone's trying to do their own imitation of what that can be. It feels like to me. And here I feel like we see that as well. I thought Paul Dano, he didn't do a bad job it's just not the Riddler that I wanted. You know, I really wish that we could have got a classic Riddler, but we got this Riddler, who was more of like I said, he was an orphan who didn't get enough love as a kid. And so he spent all of his time like doing crossword puzzles and coming up with little riddles, I guess, until he grew up into some weird dude. That's all how I can explain it. And he's kind of crazy. Does a little bit of, I don't know. It was just a little, it wasn't for me. At some point when I was watching it, I was just like, okay, I get it. He's supposed to be creepy, crazy, you know, he's supposed to be a lunatic. But I'm past that now. We've seen it so many times that it didn't do it for me. But it was still good enough. I'm not crapping on the Riddler here. I'm just saying it's not what I wanted. And at the end of the day, I think that in retrospect, after watching the movie, his performance and the character just won't be as impactful to you as maybe he should have been. At least it wasn't to me. So, didn't care too much for the Riddler. I dug the Penguin. He wasn't the Penguin that I like either, but it was what it was. Everything was supposed to be more of a grounded type of storytelling. So we've gotten through most of the main characters. Oh, Commissioner Gordon, I thought that he did a good job as well. He was pretty cool, so I don't have a problem with Commissioner Gordon. But now that we've gotten through the characters, I just want to talk about the cinematography here. Man, we get some beautiful shots in this movie. We get some of the most badass Batman shots in this movie. I am telling you all, you've probably seen a little portion of the clip in previews, but when the Penguin gets his car flipped over and you see Batman just slowly getting out of the Batmobile, fire behind him and explosions, and he's just walking slowly up to the car, cape waving behind him. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. There were so many beautiful scenes in this movie. The cinematography was A1, and the background was perfect because it looked like some form of Gotham. It might not be the Gotham you know from your comics or wherever you've seen Gotham from, but you see the city and you get a feel for it. You get a feel for it. It's something that you can't really explain unless you're a Batman fan. If you're a Batman fan, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're not a Batman fan, you're probably like, why the hell does this guy keep talking about Gotham? But it was really a big deal for me. That was a game changer for me, for sure. I mean, just overall, this movie fired on all cylinders. You had some perfectly enjoyable characters. You got your good bit of action in there. It didn't go too over the top, but you got some good action in there. You got a good story. The whole time, I was less concerned about seeing Batman punch people, and I was more concerned for seeing how Batman got to the bottom of this. They got to the bottom of everything that was happening. The riddles weren't too eccentric, so you're not going to go into this movie feeling like you're watching The Matrix to where you can't hardly understand what the hell is going on. You're going to be able to understand what's going on. So they didn't make the riddles too eccentric to where you couldn't follow the story. But there is a good bit of twists and turns in this movie. And I thought the one thing that I took away from it after watching it was that I didn't feel any closure from the movie. And that was weird. And I'm not sure that would be labeled as a complaint. I'm not sure if I'm even complaining about it at this point. I don't know. I have to watch it again, but there's no real closure here. Movies, traditionally, they have a beginning, middle, and ending. This movie felt like beginning, middle, and you really don't get a conclusion to the story. And I know that it's because this movie is meant to be, or this is going to be a trilogy. Matt Reeves is going to do a whole trilogy of these movies. But it's just, I don't know. I didn't leave the movies feeling like I got the ending to the story. And yeah, like I know it's going to be a trilogy, but I didn't feel like they really put a bow on top of this movie, if you will. It really didn't feel like it. It just felt like there were certain points where you felt like you were at the end of the movie. Then it was like, bam, oh wait, another twist. We're not at the end of the movie. Then you're like, okay, now we're at the end of the movie. It's like, oh no, now we're not at the end of the movie. And then something happened and it carried on, and then it just felt like we never got closure from it. And Gotham right now, it's in a weird state. By the end of the movie, Gotham is kind of in chaos. It's definitely going to get interesting moving forward. I will say that, but yeah, you don't get any real closure from this movie. There's no real ending to this movie. But at the same time, this movie didn't feel like it existed just to set up sequels. This movie is so unique in that point. Because, all right, often we get movies that you get an ending, but you don't get too much closure, and you know, oh, this is going to be a trilogy. We're going to get more movies. But often those movies that do that, half of the movie is them setting up sequels. Like just jamming in a bunch of different characters, a bunch of different references to take you on to a next movie, to set up the next movie. It's kind of like what we've seen with a lot of the MCU movies. Here, there was no real hints at trying to set up the next movie. If they would have tied up the end a little more tighter, you could have just watched this movie and it could have just been, okay. You wouldn't expect there to have to be a sequel. But yeah, it's really hard to explain. It's the first movie that I've seen that did that. Not only did they not really set up anything for the most part going forward, but at the same time, they didn't give you closure from this story. So it's just like, you're kind of stuck like, you're stuck in a weird place by the end of this film. At least I was. And I know a lot of people are going to ask, well, what about this Batman? How would he fit in with the Justice League? He wouldn't. One of my main takeaways when watching this film by the time it was over was that I do not want this Batman in the Justice League. I don't want to see this Batman in the DCEU. I think this Batman is better off being its own contained story. Because like I told you at the beginning of this video, this Batman isn't that well-polished Batman with all of the crazy gadgets and equipment. And not just that, though, I don't think he's ever going to become that Batman. The way this movie feels, it doesn't feel like there's a Darkseid out there in space and Superman and Krypton. And it doesn't feel like there's that type of stuff going on in the outside world. It feels way more realistic and grounded than that. So I can't see that this Batman fighting space aliens and running around with the Flash. This is totally, you totally don't get that vibe here. I can't even fathom seeing this Batman in the Justice League. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a good way. It's a compliment. I'm really digging what they did here. I don't want to say it was a reimagining of the character, but it was a different take on the character. Because the word reimagining, they use that all the time in Hollywood and they straight up butcher your characters. But no, here we got the Batman. And it's almost more Batman-ish than half the Batmans we've seen, while at the same time being a tad bit different. And being a tad bit different because there's really no Bruce Wayne there. It's all Batman. Even when he's Bruce Wayne, he's still Batman. And I dug that. But I don't want to see him in the Justice League. I don't want to see him flying around in bat jets and all this stuff because it's just not, it doesn't work with this world. It really doesn't. And once you've seen the movie, or if you've already seen the movie, then you would probably agree. But I want to get back to that one point because I've seen a lot of people complaining, a lot of critics complaining because there's no joy to this movie. There's no happiness to this movie. Robert Pattinson doesn't even crack a smile. And I'm fine with that. I was perfectly fine with that. But at the same time, I am ready again for another fun Batman movie. I'm ready for another fun Batman movie with over-the-top villains like some of his villains are. And their over-the-top costumes, colorful villains. Batman, flying around in all his crazy equipment. Batman's got a vehicle for anything. If he's in the snow, he's got the Bat Snowmobile. If he's in the water, he's got the Bat Submarine. And I want to see a movie like that. And that's the type of Batman that I want to see incorporated into the Justice League. But that's not this type of Batman. So I'm hoping that what we see going forward, I hope they leave this Batman alone. Robert Pattinson's Batman alone. I hope they leave him alone and allow that to be its own thing. And I loved it so much that I wouldn't mind if we see 6 movies from Robert Pattinson's Batman world. Because it's that awesome. But I hope that they find something else to do in the DCEU. and the more connected type of movies, I hope they find a route where they can find a different Batman, not Michael Keaton, which I like Michael Keaton, and I know he's supposedly going to be the Batman going forward in the DCEU. But I want to see a more fun, more gadgety type of Batman in the DCEU while sticking with this grounded, gritty Batman here in the Matt Reeves, Robert Pattinson universe. I think we could have them both. I think that they're that much different. You know, they're different enough that you could have two Batmans at the same time. Not in the same movie, but you could have your Batman over here in the DCEU, and you could have your grounded Batman over here in its own lane. I think that's what they need to do moving forward, because as a Batman fan, I want it all. I want it all. But it doesn't mix together. Sometimes I want to sit down and read me a dark, gritty Batman story. Something that's kind of like the Matt Reeves story we just seen. But sometimes I want to sit down and read a campy Batman story. That's kind of like the Schumacher films. That's kind of like the Batman 90s animated series. The Batman 90s animated series had like the perfect tone because it was still dark, but we still got to see all the wittiness of Batman's villains, and it was eccentric at the same time, so it wasn't necessarily grounded. And everything these days seems like every superhero movie that comes out is, oh, this is a more grounded take. This is like, oh, think about if Batman existed in the real world, or this superhero exists in this world. You know, so I'm ready to move towards to a point where we accept some of the campiness that comes with these superheroes, because that's who they are. But at the same time, I'm really digging this Batman movie. So I can't praise it enough. I think everyone should go see it, form their own opinions about it. I think everyone should go in expecting the unexpected here, because it's not what I expected. And I've been hearing about this movie and reading up on this movie and researching. You know, I've been right there every step of the way since this movie was announced. And it even caught me by surprise at the angle that they went with it. But it's definitely an interesting one. So let me know what you all think about this movie once you see it down in the comments below. If you haven't seen it already, I still want to know some of your thoughts down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell. And as always, find some time out of your day to go watch a movie.